hoping this will work. There is construction outside, so hopefully you can't hear that noise, but my husband is off at a massage appointment, so I could film upstairs in the daylight rather than using my lights in the basement. Okay. Hi, my name is Jeanette. I want to thank you for joining me on the channel Jane Reads. So today I have my June wrap up, and I have a lot of books physically. I read a total of 12 books this month, and I 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I have 9 of them physically. However, one of them is actually not my book, but I'm using it for this purpose. And I'll explain why in a minute. Okay, just to start off, I needed to get a quote from one of the books I recently finished so that I could share it with you, and I hadn't written it down. It was a book on my Kindle. And that quote is, "There's your plan and there's God's plan, and your plan doesn't count." Love it. And it immediately made me think of the saying, like, I'll give you 3 options and the first 2 don't count. Or I'll give you 3 guesses and the first 2 don't count. And that just totally reminded me of that. And I love it. Okay, but let's start at the very beginning of the month. And it's another month where I'm kicking myself for not doing a mid-month wrap-up, because now I gotta go back to the very first book I finished at the beginning of the month and be like, what was it about and how did I feel about it? Okay, so that first book is The Sweet Life by Suzanne Woods Fisher. This is book 1 in the Cape Cod Creamery series. It is a contemporary romance, and it is a mother-daughter story. Very beginning of the book, we have the daughter is engaged and just is arriving to tell her mother that her engagement is off, the wedding is not happening. And she discovers something that her mom has been dealing with and didn't want to tell her, like her mom didn't want to tell her. So then the mother and daughter go off on what would have been the honeymoon vacation to Cape Cod. And in that process, the mother buys an ice cream shop and kind of changes their whole lives throughout. And so we are following the 2 of them, how things kind of progress. There is a romance that happens throughout. And I have to say, I did not like the guy in this for a majority of the story. But as things progress and you learn things, I'm like, okay, I'm starting to like root for him. And I did like the way it ended. And I do look forward to reading the next books in the series. It is a 3-book series, so I do plan on continuing. It's just not high on my radar right now. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. I would recommend it. Okay, and then this is the one that I am borrowing from a friend, Echoes of Darkness by Darlene L. Turner. And as you'll see, it has a signed sticker. Oh, light, bad. Yeah, so Darlene has signed this one. And so I was on the launch team for Darlene, so I had an advance reader copy, so I read it. And I've always borrowed all the books from my friend, and I was in the Christian bookstore just a few days ago, and she asked if I could pick this up for her, so I picked it up, and when I found a signed copy, it was like, perfect, because I picked it up in the town that Darlene lives in. So, and on Facebook, Darlene had done a searching for her book on release day, and so she'd gone into this bookstore, and you saw her with the pile of books signing them on her Facebook page, so that it was like, okay, I knew I'd find one. And so yeah, so this one is Darlene's first full-length love-inspired book through the trade paperback. So it's not the same as the Love Inspired suspense ones, but it's still published through Love Inspired. It is a full-length book, and it is a little bit grittier, I guess I want to say. So this one is set in Ontario. You are following a cop who is a serial killer's daughter. And she's moved to a new community, kind of kept her identity hidden as it was revealed in her other community. And then she gets assigned to a case with appears to be a copycat of her father's killings. Now, only her superior knows that she is the daughter. And so he assigns her to this because, you know, she'll have some inside knowledge, hopefully, and be able to solve some of this because it is not her father, but who is the copycat. And then we have Caleb, who gets assigned to work with her. What is her name? Oakland. Such a different name, and I can't even remember it. We have Caleb, who gets assigned to work with her as part of the Canadian Watchers Squad. So it's basically a group of people that have come together to help the police with various crimes. And because we are looking at cult, possibilities are involved and stuff, because Caleb comes from a background of being involved with a cult and escaping from a cult, he gets brought in with this. And so because of like the cult and the serial killer side, that is why I would say it is a darker, grittier read. But I absolutely enjoyed it. However, I didn't enjoy that I was reading in June a book that is set in the winter and they're dealing with snow and freezing, and I'm like, not when I wanted to read this. But that's okay. I highly recommend it. I really enjoyed it. Next we have The Governess of Highland Hall by Carrie Turansky. This is book 1 in her Edwardian Brides series, and this is historical romance set, I guess, in the Regency era, I would say. Oh, I didn't even write down what year. 1911 in England. So we are following Julia, who comes on as the governess for William's children and 2 cousins that he is responsible for. And Julia is a missionary child who has spent a number of years in India, but is back in England because her parents have returned home because her father is being sick. So that is why she's trying to find a job currently, but her plan is to go back to India once her father gets over his illness. And so living with William is also his sister Sarah. And this is really an upstairs, downstairs story because I've just lost her name again. Julia is the governess, and William and Sarah like are wealthy and have all these people working for them. Then there is a gardener that is involved who's also working on the estate. And so there is a couple romances that happen throughout the story. There is one I really enjoyed much more than the other one. I'm not going to tell you how it goes. And I found it slow, and I was kind of frustrated with certain characters at certain points of time, especially with an attitude that it was presented because of how it would look to other people. And well, should I do that? And I'm just like, follow your heart. Like, who cares what other people think? Which I totally get because I think about what other people think as well. So I get that point of view, but it really was frustrating and it was just repeated a lot. So I only gave this book 3 stars because I just wasn't invested. The one thing I did like is that Julia spoke what she was thinking and shared it and encouraged people to pray about things and turn for God's direction and look for his guidance as they were making decisions. I did really enjoy that. And I really enjoyed one of the romances that happened and the way the guy stood up for the girl when was kind of being pressured a little bit. And I really enjoyed that. I did have a quote from that one to share, and that is, "We have a choice to make when trouble comes. We can reach out to God and look to him for strength and help, or we can doubt his love and purpose and allow our hearts to grow cold. It takes faith to believe that he can and will bring good out of those trials if we only trust him." Okay, the next one is Standoff by Patricia Bradley. This is book 1 of the Niches I think it's Natchez, Park Rangers series. I'm like, am I reading that title right? And so yeah, I started another series. And this is a romantic suspense. This was the first book that I'd ever read by Patricia, and it will not be the last. I really enjoyed these characters and was really invested once I figured out what was going on. So I did do a reading vlog on this one, which should be up before you see this video. And I said in that the first 5 chapters, so the prologue and 4 chapters, you are introduced to 5 different people. And I had no idea who, because I hadn't really read the back of this, because I kind of wanted to go in blind, but I had no idea who I was really following throughout the story. And as we introduced 5 different people, it's like, okay, well, one of them is the villain, but how do all these other people play in and what's going on? So we have our main female character whose father dies very early on, like within that very beginning of 5 chapters. And his death is ruled a suicide. But the daughter is like, no, that's not possible. And we know what really happened when he died. So then one of the guy characters gets involved, and he's undercover and trying to help the female figure this out, but without blowing his cover, because he's involved in trying to bring down a drug ring and everything. And it's just, there's so much happening. And there was a certain character that I did not like, and I thought, oh, they have to be involved. And I thought they were the mastermind. They were not the mastermind, but they were involved. So I was okay not to trust him or like them. But yeah, I was fully invested in what was going on and needed to know. The only thing that kind of threw me off is I don't know this setting at all. And I felt like I should have known, maybe. Like I felt a little bit lost in understanding what they were dealing with environmental wise. And yeah, so I gave it 4 stars. I really enjoyed it and I highly recommend it. Okay, then I completed a series. I finished listening to the audiobook of Every Living Thing by James Herriot. This is book number 8 in the All Creatures Great and Small series. I did not expect to finish that so like half the year, because at the beginning of the year I was on book 2. Like I just did not expect it. But I am so glad I listened to the audiobook, especially this one in particular, because not only does Christopher Timothy narrate the one that I listened to, but he's also the original actor from James Herriot from the All Creatures Great and Show series that I watched with my parents back in the early 80s. So it was really cool to have like the guy that I knew as James Herriot read it. And this one felt more like short stories being shared, memories, than kind of a continuation of things going on, which is the issue I've had with the previous books. Is I think it was told the same way but presented more as a continuing story, whereas this one was presented more as just little memories or periods of history, like moments in his life that he wanted to share with us. And there was some really funny anecdotes shared and stories, kind of some of the scrapes he got into and how he came across to certain farmers, because like if something was going to go wrong, it was going to be at this farm kind of thing, and he's going to look like an idiot at this farm, and how he shared the different incidents that happened to make him feel like he was looking like an idiot. And then there was a really fun story with these 2 stray cats that appeared at his home, and him and his wife were trying to take care of and kind of entice them into the house so they didn't have to stay outside in the winter and cold and stuff, but the cats would not come in, and how like they trusted them at certain times and like for that moment, but then like the trust was, nope, I gave it to you for that short little period of time and that's it. And I really enjoyed it. I gave this one 4 stars because I really enjoyed my experience with this one. And it really felt like I was there in the Yorkshire countryside. The Magnolia Palace by Fiona Davis. So this one is very different than my normal reads. It is a historical fiction. It's actually a dual timeline, but both historical. But this is a general fiction, and we are following a model for sculpture artists, and she exposes herself as part of this model art. I think that's the best way to say it. And so that was a little like, I don't know how I feel about this. And I know like sculpture and art and right, there's a whole thing, but I'm still, I don't know. So anyway, so then we follow her, and through a series of events, she ends up working for, she comes out, she's no longer a model at this point in time. She ends up working for a wealthy Harris whose father has collected a ton of sculptures, and they happen to be of her at times, but the Harris has not connected that the person working for her as a private secretary is the model of these sculptures. And so we're just following these two women, the wealthy woman and the private secretary, through different incidences. And the wealthy daughter is really trying to care for the father, but the family relationship of this family is a little bit different and strained because of things that have happened in the past. In the more modern historical timeline, we are now following a model who gets snowed in at the mansion that this, from the other timeline that they were living in and working in. It is now a museum. And she gets snowed in with somebody else, and they end up finding some little clues, and kind of, so that's how the two histories kind of get tied together, is through these little clues, because we see a scavenger hunt kind of begin in the first timeline, which is, do I have the timelines written down? Yeah, 1919 and 1966. So in the 1919 timeline, we see a scavenger hunt kind of begin, and then in the 1966 timeline, we see them discover some of the clues and start doing the scavenger hunt. And so then the two start tying together, and I was really invested. It was so funny because at times I did not care about the 1919 timeline. I'm like, I just want to get to the 1966 timeline and that character. And then other points as it kind of progressed, I'm like, okay, I'm done with the 66. I want to go back to 19 because now I care about this character more and what's going to happen there. And I just, yeah, it was like really interesting because I flipped between which timeline was my favorite and that I was most invested in. I did give it 3 stars because I found it really slow. I found it to be a slow read, but I do like the way that it tied together in the end. And then I started With You Always by Jody Hedlund. This is book 1 in the Orphan Train series, and I was budding reading this with Alma. And I was 10 chapters in, I think, at this point in time. And I happened to be on Amazon looking at something else, and I realized that there was a prequel novella to this one called An Awakened Heart. And when I read a little bit of the summary of it, I was like, oh, this follows the romance of 2 of the secondary characters we'd met in this one. So I told Alma, I'm going to pause on this because I need to read things in order, and I'm going to read the novella first and then return to this one. So that is what I did. Thank you, Alma, for having patience with me on that. So An Awakened Heart is the prequel novella. So not only do we follow the romance of the 2 secondary characters that we meet in book 1, we also meet the main characters of the series and kind of find out how they ended up in the situation that they are in at the beginning of this book. And I am so glad I read this story because now I feel like I got the full story. And so I gave the novella 4 stars because, again, it's a short little novella. You can't get that invested in the characters, but I enjoyed seeing it happen and kind of getting information for book 1. Okay, so then once I finished the novella, I returned to With You Always, which I said is book 1 of the series. We are following the oldest sister so there's 3 sisters throughout this whole series. And we are following Elise, who is trying to take care of her 2 sisters, as well as 2 orphans that the sisters have taken in. But they're living on the streets of New York City. Then the financial crisis happens, and a lot of people lose their jobs. And so just when things were starting to look positive for them, they had shelter over their place, 2 of them had jobs. That happens, they lose their jobs. So then Elise ends up going out west to a new community that is being started in hopes to make money and be able to send it back to her siblings to bring them to where she is. And I just absolutely loved this story. Now, when Elma and I were reading it and kind of talking between the chapters, it was like, where's the orphan train part of this? It didn't seem like other than the sisters and the 2 orphans they took in, they're all orphans, all their parents have passed. But where does the train play in? I was a little confused, but as it kind of progressed, I was like, okay, you start to see, okay, I have an idea now. And then book 2, Together Forever, really picks up with the train story, and kind of you see more of the role of the orphan train. So in book 1, this is a romance with Elise and a gentleman, and I was fully invested. Now, there were times that I didn't really like what the guy's actions were, but if he hadn't done that, things wouldn't have happened the way they happened. So I'm kind of forgiving him for that. And he was put in a really awkward position by his father, for him and his twin brother as well, by creating a competition to earn the head of the company. And I was so mad at the father when that was first. It was like, why are you doing this to your sons? Really? Yeah. And then there was things that I'm like, okay, as things started happening and progressing, I'm like, oh, he's going to be involved and they're going to be involved and it's not going to work out the way I want it to work out. Will good prevail? Basically is where I was at, hoping for. But I really enjoyed following this. I will say this does not end, the story does not wrap up in this one. Yes, by the end, Elise has romance, but the story that you've been following throughout does not wrap up. And because of that, I immediately picked up book 2, Together Forever, which I'll talk about in a minute. But first, I have a quote to share from this one, and that is, ultimately, what mattered was living in a way that pleased his Heavenly Father. That's what matters, right? So I gave this book 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. And then, as I said, I immediately picked up Together Forever, which is following one of the other sisters. And so we do get her point of view throughout book 1. So we have a little bit of an insight into what she's been thinking and been dealing with, but then we really dig into her point of view in this one, as well as a guy that she ends up interacting with. And we're following that, and there's a romance that happens. There's the orphan train storyline that really comes to life in this one. And I found this one really fun. I really enjoyed it. I do have to say, because this is 1858, I think, 1858, I did find some of the physical interactions between the romantic couple a little bit unbelievable for how they would have acted in front of people at this period of time in history. I don't feel like the people in the 1850s were so open with their feelings, especially in front of others. I guess that's the only way I can say that. But I really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed the little kids, especially one in particular that kind of roped the female into a situation, and it was just entertaining to see how it was going to progress. I did not like how the guy just kind of gave up in a way and kind of accepted and kind of really, and the female really kind of had to push him like, don't just sit down and take it, like fight for yourself. And yeah, so I enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. I do have a quote to share from this one. It is, "Don't forget when your burdens grow heavy that God is walking alongside you, waiting for you to cast your cares upon him." Okay, so just like book 1, this one does not complete the family story. So then I immediately picked up Searching for You, which is book 3. Now, I do not own this one physically, but thankfully this whole series is on Kindle Unlimited, so that is how I read it. And we are following the other sibling, and kind of we find out what has happened to them in the midst of these 2 books, because we did not get their point of view throughout the first 2. And so we find out. I do have to say, at the beginning, I found it really slow, and I did not like her. I did not like decisions that she was making. Again, I go back with the caveat that if she didn't make those decisions at that point in time, she wouldn't have ended up where she was. And I really liked where she was, so I can deal with those decisions now that I've read it and know where she ends up. But at the beginning, it was like, why? What are you doing? But then halfway through the book, something happens, and I was so on board. The romance, I was so on board for it. I loved watching it and see. I just wish the guy kind of opened up his heart a little bit quicker, stop following your brain, follow your heart. But yeah, I flew through the last half because I just needed to know what was going to happen. And it's like, oh, is it going to go the way I want it to go? Please let it go the way I want it to go. And so I gave this book 4 stars. And the quote that I have to share from this one is, "When we're finally willing to let go of the messes we've made, the good Lord can step in and salvage the scraps." Okay, then my other audiobook was Twisted Innocence by Terri Blackstock. This was another completing a series. It is book 3 of the Moonlighters series, and we are following 3 sisters throughout this series, and this follows the 3rd sister who we did meet in book 1. Again, this series really has a continuing storyline throughout all 3 books. Each book does have an individual kind of storyline that's going on, but then there's a continuing one as well. And we see kind of everything wrap up and justice happening in this one. And then with the main storyline, like Twisted Innocence, they're innocent, but they're not innocent. They're also guilty of other stuff. Like, the title made so much sense as I was reading further into this. I was like, oh, okay, yeah. It is a mystery suspense book. It does have a bit of romance that happens in it. And I really enjoyed my time with this, and I was fully like, how many times can I say I was fully invested? But I was fully invested and needing to know what was going to happen, and could they bring the villain from book 1 to justice? Will it happen? And how is it going to happen? Because it seems like he has connections everywhere. And yeah, and even the Twisted Innocence person that is kind of involved, even them, I was like, I really like, yeah, they've made bad choices, but I'm really liking them. So the last book I read is Fire Mountain by Dana Mentink. This is book 1 of the Elements of Danger series. It is a romantic suspense, and it just released July the 1st. I did have an advance reader copy of this, which is why I finished it June 30th, just in time for release. And so we are following a female truck driver, Kit, who has been in an accident with her big rig. She is on a road that was supposed to be evacuated due to a volcano erupting, but she's been in an accident, and Colin comes along to try to rescue her and get her out of danger before more happens. In the midst of that rescue, they discover that she has a baby with her, and she's like, I don't have a baby, like what? And then they see gunshot holes in her windshield, and it's like, what is going on? But she's lost some of her short-term memory they assume due to the accident and the concussion that she's dealing with. And so they're trying to get to the safe evacuation zone out of this area. But in the meantime, they also find out that they have people after them. And so not only do they have the threat of the volcano erupting, but now they have people shooting at them. Where's it safe to go? And as soon as they find like kind of a safe spot, something happens and they've got to keep moving. And it was like, what? And it's bad enough trying to care for like grown adults trying to get on, but now they have this baby and they're lacking supplies, and like there's so much that's happening. This definitely is a fast-paced, full of danger story, and it's like, okay, what is going to happen? And as they're on the run, not only from the people chasing them, they're trying to get away from this volcano and trying to get to the safe zone. So yeah, there's just so much going on. During this, they are strongly depending on each other to work together to try to figure this out. And they're also like, they open up to one another, but they also realize that is it because of the danger we're in that we feel a connection, or could this connection really be real? And so they talk about that, which I really enjoyed that they did. And I really liked that Kit didn't depend on Colin to kind of save her and get her out of this situation. She worked with him and did what she had to do to make progress for them. And so when he is out of commission for a little bit, she is able to sustain and help and like kind of uses her brain. She doesn't freak out, doesn't panic. And I really enjoyed the strong female character in this one. And honestly, she reminded me a lot of my best friend, because not only has my best friend been a long haul trucker, but just like the strength of it and just like the determination to survive and do what she needs to do. I really enjoyed Kit. And there are a couple other characters that are introduced throughout that I also really liked. Like Archie, I really liked him. He was really entertaining. And I really liked him, and I was really scared for him at a certain point in time. The only thing I did not like about this book is I felt like it wrapped up too neatly. Like all of a sudden something happens and just everything is like nicely wrapped in a bow, and I was like, I don't know how realistic that is for the situation they were in. Now, I do have a quote to share from this one, and there's your plan and God's plan, and yours doesn't count. So that is the quote that I shared at the very beginning of the video, and it was from the very last book that I read, and I really like that, because our plans are not God's plans. And what we want isn't maybe what God has for us. So our plan does not count. God's plan is the one that counts. And so I gave this book 4 stars, and I highly recommend you give it a try. And I do plan on looking out for the next one when it's released, probably this time next year. I don't know. There's no announcement yet, so we'll see. So yeah, these are all the books. I can't even pick them up. These are all the books that I read this month, and as I said, I wish I had done a mid-month. I do have one comment about book covers. I have to say, I can't pick them up. I feel like this book cover is the wrong cover. I think Searching for You and Together for, so here's Searching for You. I think these two covers should be switched. But it's just a personal opinion. The titles are fine, but I don't think the covers match the stories. I think this one should go with book 3 and that one should go with book 2. I don't have a problem with book 1's cover. Okay, so that is my little thought about covers. And so that is all the books that I read this month. I am so glad that I binged this series because I really enjoyed these sisters and following it. So not only did I start 2 series, so I started the Cape Cod Creamery series, I started the Natchez Park Ranger series, but I also completed three series. I forgot about All Creatures, The Orphan Train, because I binged this series, and Moonlighters, and because this was book 3, so that ends it. So yeah, that is, oh, no, I just realized I started 3 series. This was a series 2. Oops. So I started 3 and I finished 3. So at least my series number stays even, right? So that is everything that I read this month. My favorite of the month was With You Always by Jody Hedlund. It is the only book that I gave 5 stars to this month. However, I had a lot of 4-star reads. I had a really good reading month and I really enjoyed binging the series. I don't do it often enough and I'm so glad I did. So yes, I would love to chat in the comments below. Just tell me, what was your favorite read of the month? Or if you have nothing to say, just put a girl emoji to represent sisters, because I read 2 series that were following 3 sisters, or I completed 2 series that were following 3 sisters this month. So I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this video today. I would love it if you would like and subscribe and stick around for future videos. Have a great day. Bye.